This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Squarespace. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com/MacVoices and use the discount code MacVoices4. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the home of truth, justice, and the Macintosh way. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, as we record this, today is Apple earnings day, and I gathered a few friends to talk about what was announced and what it all means to all of us. So let's find out who you get to hear from, other than me, of course. First up, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, it's great to have you back. Whenever I think of earnings and money, I think of you for some reason.
Oh, that's good association. I'll take that. It's nice to be here. I think we have some good, bad, and interesting points to talk about today, so it should be a good discussion.
No question, no question. For the few folks that don't know you, you're here on a pretty regular basis, but just in case, who are you and what do you do?
I live in Silicon Valley. I live in San Jose. I've been involved with many startups over the years, and I have a professional services company where we have targeted offerings that work with startups, or sometimes with old companies who want to learn and think to act like a startup. We're doing some work recently with a 50-year-old company that realizes that they've been getting their butt kicked in using e-marketing and content marketing strategies. So it's very interesting to do that in addition to a lot of other technology-based startups. Most recently, I've been doing a lot with several storage clients, and we've talked about that before on this show.
I'd think a 50-year-old company would be a fascinating client to try to drag kicking and screaming into a new world.
It is. It helps a lot that they had some situations where they were preparing a bid for a client. They did a little bit of search, just checking for a specific model number of a piece of equipment, and bam, top of Google, the first thing led them right into a competitor's site. That was sort of a kick in the head that what's going on here? And it's been very entertaining and very interesting to just see their cultural adaptation to learning that in the age of the internet, that so much of the sales process happens automatically. So the idea that salesman is information gatekeeper is done and over with. 50, 60, 70% of the sales process of gathering information, selecting potential partners, all that's done autonomously. So if they don't have a web presence and tools that allow them to help build a relationship, simply put, they're getting outsold. And this is sort of a marketeer's dream. A lot of these marketing automation or content marketing or inbound marketing, these are some of the words I use to describe this phenomena. These sort of systems have really matured in the past 3 to 5 years, and for many companies, it's sort of the second coming of the internet in terms of doing something different and changing their internal operations.
Sounds interesting. That sounds like
it certainly is.
To do sometime, yeah. Well, speaking of kicking and screaming, the other gentleman we have with us is Mr. Jeff Gamet. Jeff, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
And it's always great to be here. So was it me kicking and screaming coming in, or you kicking and screaming to decide to have me on?
I've taken the fifth.
Let's not say. It keeps mystery in the relationship.
It does indeed. It does indeed. So what do you do when you're not here visiting with us on the MacJury, Jeff?
Well, when I'm not here, I'm probably sitting in the towers at the Mac Observer, overseeing all of the amazing articles that all of the people write over there. And if I'm not there, I'm probably hanging out on Twitter or app.net, or probably on someone else's podcast too.
So you're in the seedy sides of town.
Oh, very much so.
Boy, this is going to be a tough group tonight. Guys, we're going to talk about Apple earnings, but I want to tell you something that happened to me today to start this off on a very positive note. I went to Panera Bread for lunch, and if you're not in the U.S. or in the Northeast, I'm not quite sure where all Panera has restaurants, but I'm standing in line waiting to order, and a lady and her daughter come up behind me, and they're in line behind me, and the little girl is 2 years old. She does not come up. I mean, she does not come up much beyond my knee, and she's holding an iPhone in a little pink case, and you look down, of course, like you do with a little kid, and smile, and she holds up her iPhone and slides it, opens it up, it touches an app, and starts playing a game, and then holds it up for me to see. And it just made me smile. It's like, okay, this is the world that the iPhone has built. A 2-year-old is walking around with an iPhone playing games. Well, I don't know what it means, but it just seemed like a nice story to start it out before we get really vicious with the Apple call.
Well, I'll tell you what I think it means. I think it means that when Apple sat down and really thought about how people interact with their environment, they put that into play in iOS. And there's a lot of people that will talk about how iOS feels dated and stale, and there's so many more innovations in Android or Windows Mobile or whatever. But the bottom line is, Apple figured out how people interact with things. And they came up with an operating system that does that. And regardless of what other features you get somewhere else, a 2-year-old can still pick up an iPhone and swipe to unlock and start playing Angry Birds or Where's My Water or whatever it is that they want to play, and they can do it.
And I know that we're going to get emails saying, well, gee, I want something a little more sophisticated than what a 2-year-old can use. And I don't think that's the point. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that having that as a base, I mean, sure, you can make it sophisticated if you want, but when we're talking about the people that don't show up on the MacJury, people that are out there just having everyday lives, and they want to integrate the technology, this is the way to go. No question.
Yeah, I think if you boil it down, it really speaks to how intuitive it is, to see, to use your fingers, to touch, to control, and that's really what it's about, right? I mean, many other systems are very, very way complex, and the beauty of the iPhone and its big brother, the giant iPod Touch, known as the iPad, is they're very intuitive, very natural. Certainly, if you want more complexity, you can get it there or graduate into a Mac. It depends on what your needs are. But I think just in terms of having something very deep, simply rooted in terms of how people think about things, I agree with Jeff. Apple's obviously spent a lot of time and they nailed it.
Agreed. So that has nothing to do with the earnings call, but it just is one of those things that makes you really think about how far we've come and yet how approachable the technology remains based on Apple's philosophies.
I have to disagree with you just a little bit, Chuck. I think it totally plays into the earnings call.
Okay.
Because when you look at the numbers of people that are buying iPhones and iPads, they're buying them because they are accessible.
Okay, that's a good spin, Jeff. But it's not spin; it's true. You're right. You're right, and we've all seen the learning curve issues or lack of learning curve issues for the basic functions. You can get an iPhone, you can get an iPad, and be actually using it in a very, very short period of time.
Right.
Right, and sometime I'm sure during this discussion we'll talk about the relative market share numbers of iPhone, iPad, and how users of those devices are so much more active and leaving many more footprints in terms of their using web services than Android devices. And I always love it when Tim Cook is somewhere. He says, gee, you wouldn't know what people are doing with those devices. They outsell us many times, but God, where are they? Are they just left in the desk drawer someplace?
Yeah, you do occasionally wonder about is somebody spinning some of the statistics. You can't help.
I can see where it looks or could appear that people are spinning statistics, but when we have so many different groups coming up with similar data independently over and over, I'm thinking it's not so much a spin on statistics anymore as it is a serious question. What's happening with all these Android devices? Because they're not showing up on the internet like iPhones and iPads are. And actually, this is a conversation that Brian Chaffin and I have had several times, where we just go back and forth trying to figure out what exactly are these Android devices being used for. And
they're smart dumb phones.
yes, as a matter of fact, I refer to them as expensive feature phones today.
Okay, I would certainly agree with that, and I think that the interesting thing about Apple, and there's some of the numbers today were really interesting. That we haven't, despite all the cries that they need a lower price device, there hasn't been much slippage in their average ASP of their devices. Whereas these Androids that are sold, people make a big deal about, gee, how much is Samsung spending on marketing? Well, one of the dirty little secrets is that if you're offering rebates or sales spiffs, etc., that comes out of the marketing budget. That does not come out of sales. And there's all sorts of accounting and other reasons for that. But they're buying their way into the market. They're spending heavily on promotion, and they're incenting the sales guys. So when they go in, basically you go in and say, "Oh, I need a new smartphone. My old phone died. It doesn't even work. I left it at home." Oh, and then right away they'll start to show you, a range of Android devices, and that's all sales incentives, right? What's the incentive for the salesperson? How do they make the most money? If that's to sell an Android phone or a Windows phone or a Nokia phone, whatever the phone du jour is, that's what they're going to do. And I think that way, sort of the Apple results are a little purer in the sense that it is clearly customer choice, and they very carefully, not just for the phone, but all the iPads, Macs, everything. If you can get more than a couple % price difference, no matter where you're Apple Store or Amazon or Mac Mall or wherever, you just don't see it. The prices are very, very well controlled, which again is indicative of, do BMW prices or Mercedes prices change very much? No, they don't. So it's all consistent that Apple is creating this premium device, and pricing is one way to communicate its premium status to potential buyers.
Okay, so let's step over into the earnings call, but Mark, I'm going to use that as a jumping off point, and we'll probably be all over the place here. But one of the things that was pointed to is that Apple's margin level is down a full 10% from previous quarters. And I thought that was interesting. It probably plays into the fact that the Mac sales were pretty much flat, and that it seemed like iPads and iPad minis accounted for more. And there is a lower profit margin there, or at least a lower sticker price. Any reaction from Jeff? How about with you? Any reaction to that difference? I mean, that still seems like a pretty healthy profit margin, even though it's not up to what Apple has been doing in the past.
It is a pretty healthy profit margin. And if it was any other company, people would be raving about how awesome that margin is. But since it's Apple, people look at it and go, not good enough, which I find to be absolutely fascinating. Now, part of that is Apple's fault, because they have been able to have a profit margin that is substantially higher than what anyone else can maintain. And I think with the way that they are producing their products now, especially products like the iPad, where the margins that they have are now lower, well, that's going to play in, because they're selling so many iPads, and when you sell that much of a product that has a lower margin, it brings down your average for your margins overall. So of course it's going to be a little bit lower, but if you look at what they're selling overall, they can't spend money as fast as they make it.
Right. Yeah. So before you talk about that, I would go back to Chuck's point, and I think that it's sort of the way I looked at it, their high water mark of their 47.4% gross margin back in whenever it was, second quarter 12, to me, I would reverse it. I would say, what happened that quarter that their margin was that high? Because I think, yes, it is 10 points lower, but this level in the high 30s is way more consistent with what their performance has been over the past couple of years. So it could be that they got very lucky, had very, very rich iPhone sales that was pulling it up. Certainly, as Jeff said, I haven't had the ability to really dig in and sort of do the numbers, but iPad was about 20% of sales this quarter. A year ago, it was 16%. This much I was able to figure out and put in a spreadsheet. So if you have that and you see the numbers where there's, there was all these horror stories about product shift from the big iPad to the iPad Mini. That certainly has a gross margin impact. Is it enough there? Well, it's hard to tell because we don't know what the gross margin of either device is. On the face of it, that sort of shift, it seems plausible. It's just very, very difficult to prove it. I think there's also maybe another factor that is not been spoken of, which is, remember the past couple of years there were all these horror stories about Foxconn and their conditions, and the famous Tim Cook trip out there last year, and he said yes, they would work and they would raise prices and Apple would pay for it. Well, could that absorb 1%, 2%? I think certainly you have to ask that question. That is very, very possible. That in conjunction with product mix, I think that explains some of the decline of gross margin that we have seen. But I think the biggest thing for as thinking about Apple as a security over the past 6 months is Wall Street is totally confused about how fast is this company growing, what are their gross margins, and that's why we seem to have this magic shift from Apple couldn't do anything wrong to we've had 6 months of just day after day brutal punishment, and even all the idiots coming out and writing spam bait articles, and it's just just there's been this toxic environment out there for the stock.
Yeah, we also have the unknown, which is exactly how much money is Apple having to spend on components and manufacturing costs. I think those are higher now than they used to be. And part of that goes back to what you were just saying about Apple is absorbing some costs for Foxconn to improve working conditions. And I have a feeling that some chips and other components that Apple has been able to get really good prices on in the past, probably not quite as good now because the market is just tough all the way around.
So if I translate that, I think you're saying that Samsung has raised the price on the ARM processors they're selling them, and Apple's taking the shorts until they can get another supplier.
I think that's an awesome translation.
Good. I speak Jeff.
Yeah, which is either great or get a therapist right now.
We'll let Chuck decide on that.
No, don't. Please don't give me that. Please don't give me that responsibility.
Yeah, it's all on you, Chuck.
Guys, how about just the overall sales level? Especially, I mentioned that the Mac sales seem to be pretty flat. Not exactly a surprise. In fact, let's touch on that. Tim Cook sort of acknowledged that. In fact, he did acknowledge. I shouldn't say it that way. He did acknowledge that they may have made a mistake by announcing the new iMacs when they could not produce them. And
yes.
They think that may have hurt things. It seems like Apple under Tim Cook is willing to admit missteps, possible missteps, things that could be admitted or recognized as missteps. You think that is an adequate explanation, and should Apple be punished in the stock market for making that misstep?
They've already been punished.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Yeah, they have been punished.
Okay, well, was it a fair punishment then? Maybe I'll say it that way.
Well, yes. I mean, to the extent that for better or for worse, Wall Street is an game of expectations of what will this company do, and it doesn't matter whether they make toilet paper or iMacs. It's what's the revenue, what's the profitability, what's the growth rate. These are the ways that Wall Street will normalize whatever your product or service is, for better or for worse. And Apple had that supernova, explosion of, announcing products for the entire product line, and they just were caught shorthanded with the number of iMacs that they were able to produce. So yeah, is it fair? You could argue one way or the other. And the reality is that they overstimulated demand and they couldn't deliver.
Which is something Apple has done on more than one occasion.
Right. So I could see it, frankly, Chuck, on some of the things like you don't know how an iPod model is going to take off. You don't know. No, iPad. They're growing so explosively. You don't know on some of the demand on some of the phones, or maybe the mix of phones. But for something like a Mac, which is 25 years or so of history, I would have expected they have a much better ability to predict and forecast demand for that.
That's always been an issue for Apple. They have a fantastic track record of underestimating what demand for a product will be.
Which some would say is a very studied thing, that it makes the product seem more appealing, maybe with a little bit of scarcity. In this case, maybe they truly underestimated, or maybe they couldn't produce what they thought they could. But I've seen plenty of accusations made that this is a tactic.
Could be. Don't know. As an outsider, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I think in the case of the iMac, they probably knew that they weren't going to have inventory, and they went ahead and announced the product so that people wouldn't be saying, what about the new iMac? And they were hoping they'd be able to ramp up production in time, and I bet that there was a room full of people saying, yeah, we can't do it. And there were bosses saying, well, find a way to make it happen. And it turns out the people in the room were right. There wasn't a way to make it happen, and so there they were, just kind of stuck without any product to sell.
Am I correct, though, Jeff? Wasn't that the iMac announced pre-Christmas? Wasn't it a bit of a blocking strategy to say, okay, well, the new iMac, I may not be able to have it on Christmas morning, but I'll be able to have it, shortly thereafter. And of course, it didn't come shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and I'm sure that played into the decision to make the announcement, because if people are thinking, well, I'm going to be able to have the iMac right around Christmas, so I'll wait instead of buying this HP whatever thing. And it ended up backfiring for Apple because they simply couldn't produce product at all, apparently.
Right. I think there's 400,000, 500,000 unit shortfall in Q4 calendar 2012.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
But even this year, I mean, this quarter, it looks like, I have their information right here. The units were down 27%. Revenue was down 20%. So that gap tells me that they were probably selling higher end units, which, in absence of a Mac Pro, has got to be in the new iMac, or maybe more Retina devices.
You know what's great about Squarespace? Well, actually quite a bit. But let's start with the fact that they're always updating what you can do with your website. For example, they just added the new Adirondack template, perfect for small business, but useful for anyone who is looking for a bold design. And it perfectly supports Squarespace's recently added commerce options. But that's not all. Squarespace just added a calendar function called the Events Collection. Now you can easily share calendar-related information, including your schedule, on your website in either a calendar or list view. And that's just the latest enhancement to Squarespace's already impressive set of features and capabilities, all easily accessible by selecting, clicking, or dragging. Anyone can do it. You can do it, and you should. So what are you waiting for? Try Squarespace for 14 days free with no obligation. When you're ready to buy in the whole way, and you will be, go to squarespace.com/MacVoices and use the offer code MacVoices4 to save 10% on your first purchase. Get on the web now with Squarespace. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. Okay, Mark, you're sort of leading me different places. a Mac Pro. Last year we heard from Tim Cook that we could expect to see something for the Mac Pro users. And I'm very careful to choose my words. I think that's exactly what he said. He did not say a new Mac Pro, but something for the Mac Pro.
He said something for the... Yes.
Right.
Tim was
I think, yeah, it was vague. And I think the implication was in the later part of this year, 2013.
Well, okay, so if we follow that, which probably takes us way off where you were planning on going, Chuck, but hey, hold on for the ride.
So what's new about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, welcome to any show I'm on. So Tim made a point of saying during the earnings report today that Apple has a lot of exciting products coming, and he specifically said fall, or actually I think what he said was later in 2013. So that would indicate fall, and into 2014. And when he was pressed on the time frame by one of the analysts, he would not say anything other than this fall and 2014. So the implication from that is that Apple doesn't have any big product announcements coming until end of summer, beginning of fall.
I disagree with that. I would think so. I didn't have the opportunity to listen to the forecast. Sorry, to the earnings call yet. But just from the way you're saying it, we have exciting new things. Is an upgrade to a Mac Pro, is that a new thing? Or is a new thing, I bet you people were going gaga over an Apple TV or an Apple Watch or the toaster refrigerator, that people are, and again, I think this is part of the reason why we saw this roughly 35-40% collapse in share value is people are wondering, okay, if Apple's a hit machine, where's the next hit? So there's all sorts of just unknown out there that Wall Street, sell and walk away is sort of the general adage that they would have.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and but with the way Tim worded it, and I was actually listening to the conference call, it left me wondering: is he implying through the things he's saying and the things he's intentionally omitting that there's no big product announcements until this fall?
Okay, so let's explore that. If he's doing that, is Apple signaling that maybe they want to go to have a big supernova product announcements in the fall each year?
And that's very possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just if that's what Apple's doing, then this would be part of the retraining program that they have to put all of us through as journalists and bloggers and analysts and investors so that we know what to expect moving forward.
Or is this Sun Tzu is just pumping out false information so that if he strikes, pick a date, 3 weeks from now with a brand new Mac Pro, that everyone, ooh and ah, and this excitement, this is new, this is really great, because no one was expecting it.
And that's totally possible as well.
Right, and that's where I check in. Who knows? You can see
Apple
the reasons.
Doesn't tell us.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is what makes me crazy. All right, and you two are falling into it as well. First of all, Apple. We just finished talking about how Apple got pounded for saying new iMac, but they couldn't deliver it. So for whatever reason, whether they were pressured into it, whether it was just an honest mistake, or a calculated mistake, or a calculated misstatement, but everyone seems to think that this stuff has to come out like clockwork.
Yes, and that's the problem.
Exactly. I mean, Apple left Macworld for exactly that reason, that they, or at least that's one of their stated reasons, they wanted to be out from under that. Yet, for a couple of years, they kept right on that schedule.
Right. Okay, see, that's part of the problem. While we have created this expectation that Apple is going to give us a blockbuster product every quarter, Apple has allowed us to believe that, and they have fed into that to a degree. So we are to blame, and Apple is to blame. And what I think Apple is doing, and has been doing over the past year, is slowly retraining us without saying that. And they're retraining us to expect products on a different cycle than what we have been expecting. And the rumor mill is very slow to learn. So we will continue to see all kinds of ridiculous rumors about products that are shipping and then are late because they didn't ship and they never were products in the first place. And so that will make our retraining slower, but I think Apple really is working on taking control over its news cycle again, and which is something that they really haven't had over the past 6 months. And,
so, Jeff,
yes.
I would stipulate they're doing that, and that would seem to bear out. That there was somewhere end of last year. Maybe it was at D8. Tim Cook, was interviewed and said they were going to double down on security. And lack of information. So it appears certainly they've done that. So if we stipulate that that's what they're doing, I guess the question is why? What's the objective?
I would say the objective has more than one facet to it. On one side, it helps reinstill the mystery about what the company is doing, keeping focus on Apple even when they don't have any products to announce. And the other part is totally the Sun Tzu thing, where they are keeping their competitors off balance because they never know what to expect. And I mean, wouldn't it be just an incredibly brilliant move on Apple's part to have orchestrated all this information about the iWatch, and they never have plans to make one, because all of their competitors are scrambling now to make smartwatches. And if their competitors are focusing on something that Apple doesn't think is a market at all, Apple can focus on what their real target is, and their competitors are not in any position to be able to respond in a nimble way when Apple drops the next amazing bombshell on everyone.
I'd love to be able to issue credit or blame for this, and I don't, because I don't remember where I saw it or who wrote it. But there was someone saying that Apple, it was a negative article for Apple, saying that Apple was really losing the opportunity to create a market with an iWatch, and that they were probably going to be behind the 8 ball because of Google Glass. That Google Glass was by the time the iWatch comes out, Google Glass will be so well entrenched that there will be no point.
What a crock! But continue.
Well, it's a crock, Jeff, in the sense that, first of all, we don't know if the iWatch exists.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing, a literal handful of people have had Google Glass, and
right, it's a developer product right now.
Yeah, and so you're saying that Apple is losing based on a product that they haven't announced or acknowledged, versus
for a market that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, based against another product that a few hundred exist, and it's like, it just makes your head go down for a while. And which one of you said it at the beginning? Link bait. This is all link bait. It's somebody trying to fill a web page with some analysis that we might as well talk about the Enterprise versus the Millennium Falcon. Come on.
Now,
analysis.
See, that's not
You're
even
talking
a
about
fair
creative
comparison.
fiction.
I mean, we're talking about different galaxies, completely different time frames, totally different technologies for moving your spacecraft around. That's just not a fair comparison.
In other words, it's right on point.
Yes, it is.
Right. Yeah. So we will see. I mean, it's been eerie. It's now the middle of April. Not a word from Apple on new products. Not a peep yet about a developer conference.
Yeah, although if Apple had announced developer conference on Monday or Tuesday, well, I would have been very
in 90 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to sell out in under 2 hours, of course. But with the earnings report happening today, I would have been very surprised if Apple had announced WWDC on Monday or Tuesday. Now, tomorrow, we'll see. I will be up early tomorrow for just in case. Because
okay, so
let's
go
earnings report. So now they can make the big WWDC announcement.
Okay, let's go back to talking about earnings.
Yeah. Well, one point.
Have we even done that yet?
Yeah. Well, we bounced around it. But 1.2, and I agree with Jeff. If WWDC had been announced and whatever the choice of ticket distribution is this year, that would have been a big part of the conference. And it would have been a negative part, simply because Apple has such demand for this conference that it can't possibly fulfill it. So naturally, if you can't fulfill all the demand that you have, you're going to take it on the chin because of it. So I'm with Jeff. Tomorrow morning wouldn't surprise me at all. As we record this, it wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Well, we also have the potential implications going into an earnings report with what would be seen as a very big announcement, because the implication or the assumption that many analysts and other people in the industry have is that when Apple announces WWDC, we now have a firm date for new product announcements as well. Mm-hmm. And since we haven't had any new product announcements since October, that suddenly becomes an incredibly significant date. So announcing it right before an earnings report probably would have been a bad move for Apple, but also could have been seen by some as an attempt to manipulate stock value.
Good point. Mark, you want to talk about earnings? Pick your favorite topic about today's earnings announcement, and let's let you run with it.
Oh, my favorite topic. Oh, I have this number here on this Mac. I think, what's the number? $12.5 billion cash flow from operations, profit of $11.6 billion. I mean, that's those are nice numbers, don't you think? 12.5, that's like 12.5, that's like an eighth of $100 billion worth of profit. You know, it's a nice number.
And so clearly Apple's going out of business anytime now.
Oh, they're doomed. I mean, you know, I know you have a family tag, so you know there's a lot of expletives, you know, of just how horrible they're doing, but we can't use them here.
Yeah, they should give the money back to the shareholders, right?
Yeah, they proved that doesn't work as a strategy. So, but I mean, I mean, so again, I go back to it is, you know, Apple's is phenomenal. You know, they had. You know, with the iPhone, the iPad, you know, they had these huge growth spurts in the late 2000s, and you know, it's dramatically increased the size of the company. Because let's see, you know, for this past quarter, iPhone was $23 million, and Mac was $5.4 million. So iPad was 8.7. So all their growth, all their new values are coming from these products that are less than 5 years, 3 years or 6 years old. It's I mean, that's truly interesting and truly stunning.
Didn't Tim also point to the flat Mac sales as somewhat contributed to by the overall down market for PC?
It's the post PC.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so so the news last week or the week before, Windows unit sales are down 14% units. So Apple being down 1.6% in comparison is is doing damn good. So again, I think what it is that we're all moving to these mobile devices so that we're not buying as many or replacing as often those desktop computer systems, even if it is a notebook. We're supplementing with other devices.
And I mean, sure, it's a bad thing if they don't sell as many Macs, but can you really expect any company? We've talked about this. We talked about this a couple of years ago on the show. No company could keep up the pace that Apple was keeping up. I mean, for a while, it seemed like every month there was a significant new announcement. Hardware, software, new product. It just wasn't possible, and everybody seems surprised at this point. When if you just step back and
I don't know if honestly, I don't know if people are surprised versus that we have this cacophonous blogosphere out there that they if it were cable news network, they have a certain number, they have 24 hours that they have to fill. On the internet and blog space is certainly many times that, if not infinite. So I think that the nature of the system is such that in absence of news, they'll hallucinate and create stuff, or they'll go negative and look at everything. And a year ago everything was positive, now everything is negative. So sentiment changes. I think the more important thing is that Apple continue to focus on this. Was it you, Chuck, or Jeff, who said earlier that Apple's criticized that they don't develop new markets? And well, that may or may not be the case, but they focus on creating products that solve real problems, and that's why they get explosive growth. It's something that it solves a problem that people maybe knew they had, or they knew they had, but they didn't expect or didn't think that there was a solution available, and that's why when they see it, things $500 for an iPad, when everyone said, "Oh, Apple is going to be over $1,000," no wonder some of these things take off, and grow very, very rapidly. But again, that growth doesn't last forever. We're still seeing. I think year over year, the iPad had very, very strong growth.
Yes,
comparatively speaking.
And the iPhone still has nice growth.
Yeah. So iPhone year to year 3%, iPad 40%. So.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
and yet the iPhone, according to some, is dying. The iPhone is old. The iPhone is decrepit.
These words sell news. These words sell clicks.
They sell clicks, but then you also have the. I'm going to get totally flamed for this, but you have the neckbeards that totally love Android because they can really get under the hood and they can do all the Android-y kind of stuff they want to do, and they look at what the iPhone offers and it's very locked down, and they don't like that. And so they don't see that potential expandability that comes from your own hacking in the iPhone. Therefore, Android is better. And they don't see this rapid change in iOS like they are creating themselves in Android. Therefore, iOS is stale. Now, yes, there's some things that Apple should do to keep iOS fresh. What exactly those things are, well, it depends on who you talk to. But overall, no, iOS isn't stale. iOS isn't old. And if you look at sales of iPhones and iPads, well, it's pretty clear to the buying from the buying public's spending dollars that iOS is not stale. Because if it was, if it didn't have the flash and the excitement that they wanted, then they would be buying something else, because they can spend less money to get a smartphone or a tablet.
Oh, you mean a dumb smartphone?
Yes, or as I was calling them earlier today, expensive feature phones.
Yeah, premium feature phones. So I think this is part of the tyranny of. At 3 different times in my career, I've had opportunity to work for some of the well-known, market research companies, some of the 2-letter and 4-letter, or other companies where everything now is going to be big and it's going to be $1 billion market or more in 5 years. Just all the stupidity of these institutionalized services. But for them, they have this huge problem of how they define categories, and they're very slow to change categories because it will risk alienating large vendors. And don't want to go off track here, but to some extent, a lot of the large consolidated market research, it's like the mob. It's they tell vendors, oh well, we understand what users want. They tell users, oh, we have insight into what vendors want, and then they play them off against each other and collect fees. So they don't have any particular insight.
Great gig if you can get it.
It's a great gig if you can get it, but that's why they're very careful to. I mean, even still, are they talking about is the iPhone it's a media consumption tablet, but now recently everyone looks at if you accumulate iPad plus Mac sales, Apple's the biggest PC or that modified category of PC maker in the world, but yet they don't draw the lines that way. So those institutions have their own business and other institutional bias, but some of the problem we have is if you look at Android is a smartphone. Well, why is it a smartphone? Oh, it has a web browser, has all these apps. Doesn't matter whether people use it or not. So if you look operationally defined in terms of how is a device used, sort of like they say in Washington, if you want to know where a man stands, got to know where he sleeps. You want to know, is that Android is a smartphone? You got to look at how it's used, and it's clearly used in a very, very different way than iPhones are. Unfortunately, we only have one category called smartphone to put it in, and everyone is looking at that category and everything else. And as an investor, it will be interesting to see. We'll start to see analysis in the next couple of days to couple of weeks about what Apple's share of the profit share of the smartphone market is, because as an investor, that's what you care about, right? Is the profits. Who cares if these other guys sell 10 times more than you, but they sell 10 times more than you, but they only get 20% of the capture 20% of the profits, and you capture 66%. At that point, it's almost a Talmudic question. What does it mean to to be winning in the marketplace?
You know what, though, Mark? Your comments to me are very interesting, because they are from someone that's interested in the financials, and we're talking like investors or from an investor perspective. How about just from the customer's perspective? Do you think a customer really cares that Apple made record profits or didn't make record profits when they walk into a store to pick up an iPad or an iPhone or a new computer, Mac, PC, whatever? Short of the company still being around to support them and service whatever it is they're buying, is anybody?
I think there are three things. It's one is this thing so expensive that I'm being taken advantage of?
Right.
Point number two, company image. Is this an okay, acceptable company to buy from? If they were to disappear, am I going to get stuck by a phone? Am I going to get poor service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And then the third is going to be sort of at one level, what are the bragging rights? If do they have any bragging rights that particularly care? Is there any brand affinity that they get or social benefit they get by having brand A versus brand B?
I might disagree with you on the first one, and that is the price, because the price, as with anything, is just what it's worth to you. I mean, we know people who will go out and spend an ungodly amount of money on a gaming PC that I wouldn't spend $10 for, because it doesn't do anything that I need it to. It doesn't do what I want it to. And not because it's a PC, but more because it's tuned for gaming. So I think the price thing depends on how you value it, just like anything else. What can it do for me, and what am I willing to pay for it? So I don't think it has to be the lowest thing. I mean, if I just want a tablet, just to be able to carry around and say I have a tablet, I can sure do better than an iPad. But if I want to actually do things with the tablet, then I have to define what those things are going to. Yeah. Or Jeff, I want to be fair here. It depends on what those things are. If I'm just going to watch movies on it, hey, maybe a Kindle Fire or an Android is adequate for me.
Actually, if your plan is to purchase music and videos and books from Amazon, and that's really all you want to do, you should go buy a Kindle Fire, because that's the best device for that. It's the iPad for Amazon, because it ties directly into their store, and it does that very well. So yeah, for something like that, I would absolutely recommend getting a Kindle Fire over an iPad. For general day-to-day use, where you need an all-encompassing device, for most people, I'd say get an iPad.
Yeah, and well, with the number of apps in the App Store, the odds are a lot better that you're going to be able to find what it is that you want to do with it, or something that you actually can do with it that will be useful and beneficial to you.
Right, and so that was going back to the earnings call. I was reading the 2 Hour Live blog, and I don't know whether it was Oppenheimer or Cook who presented the statistics that I guess they paid out $9 billion over this past year to developers.
$9.5 billion.
Yeah, that's humongous. What was it? 3 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, that market just didn't exist.
Yeah, talk about creating.
And when you think about okay, what's the average price? A couple bucks for an app, or $1 or $2 on the iPhone, and maybe 10 on the iPad. Think about the volume of apps that are being sold.
Yeah, and the dollars Apple is paying back out to third-party developers is in the billions, not millions, but billions. It's crazy how much money is going back out. And granted, that's probably mostly going to a small group of developers, but still, that's a lot of money overall that's going back out to developers.
Jeff, that's something that always, and I don't want to anger the developer community because I want the developers to continue to do their thing, but they always point at, well, there are a couple dozen that are really benefiting from this. Well, couldn't you say a lot of the same thing on the PC side? Maybe not quite as centralized for a variety. You could
probably say that for almost any market.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so why is this a surprise? It seems like everything is being democratized one way or another, and the fact that you can get your app in the App Store and maybe have a runaway hit, but it's got to do something, and it's got to do something compelling. You can't just put it there and people throw money at you.
Right. So I would say, apart from looking at all the revenue they're generating, I had lunch yesterday with a developer, Mac developer, and he's telling me the latest tales of woe of just how horribly Apple treats its developers in terms of he had an app. They had an app in, they needed to do a bug fix release. The old app wasn't sandboxed. In order to get the bug fix in, it had to be sandboxed. And they were going, trying to go through that process. And just the people at Apple didn't understand, number one, they wouldn't, they say, oh, blah, blah, blah. They send, a 10-point letter. It's not compliant, here's why. No information. Finally escalated it, it took 10 days to escalate it to find out, well, what is it? Oh, well, you're in violation of point 21 down here. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Oh, well, why do you say that? And this and the other. So they just didn't have the technical, sophistication to be able to understand what their own guidelines were, and they wouldn't describe anything other than say you're in violation. Here's this long list of items. So they're probably, I think they're probably at risk of mistreating a lot of their developers, and they're kind of caught between okay, the Mac App Store is taking all the oxygen out of anybody going to third-party places, but they're amusing people there. Long term, this is not a healthy thing for Apple, given the strength and dependence that they have on developers. So if Microsoft or Google came and threw money at people, would they be able to make it work? Maybe I don't know. It depends. Certainly there's no evidence that there's a viable app market for Microsoft, and the app market for Google doesn't seem to indicate that people are willing to pay money. So maybe it's just a world of hurt, and there's no solution to it.
Well, but how about the volume of apps that Apple gets in? We've all heard about that. Just sheer number of apps in the App Store. If you're going to see updates to even a small percentage, you're talking about a lot of apps that have to be reviewed. I'm not making excuses. Apple has an amazing war chest, but at some point, there has to be
I think they may have done that. I've known this developer for several years. 2-3 years ago, there may be complaints about turnaround time. I haven't heard that recently. Now it's more about some of the arbitrariness or the vagueness about they reject things. As an outside observer, again, I don't know if this scales and extrapolates to other developers' experience, but it seems that you deny first and then improve second.
Fair statement.
That's pretty common.
Yeah. Guys, we're pretty much out of time. This has been an interesting discussion. We didn't dig into all the announcements at the earnings call, but I think we used them to as a springboard for some discussions on related topics. So, Mark, when you're not here, where can folks find you? I want to make sure that we get our opportunities to plug what you two do.
Easiest way, you can find me on Twitter at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio, or they can visit my website, TSHTI, initials for Tactics Sells High Tech Inc., TSHTI.com.
And so if you want to hire Mark, that's where you go. He'll be done with that 50-year-old company in no time flat. Jeff, I think you mentioned a little website called the Mac Observer.
I probably did mention that. So, yep, that's the first place people can go to find me since I'm the managing editor. So I spend a lot of time there. And then you can also find me on Twitter and app.net. My name on both is Gamet. And when I hang out at coffee shops, I see all kinds of ridiculous things happening. So I write those up in a blog called Fresh Brewed Tales. So you can go check that out too.
And folks, if you think nothing exciting ever happens in coffee shops, you need to read Jeff's blog.
And everything's true.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. That's the scary part. But no two little 2-year-old girls running with iPhones, Jeff.
No, and actually, I would probably write that up as a cool thing. And I don't think I've written up any cool things for Fresh Brew Tales. It's all just been ridiculous stuff.
Yeah. Well, you got to hang out Panera Bread where I do. That'll work for you.
I do like Panera Bread. They treat me well. So
yes.
I should come out and we'll go get a sandwich.
You got it. And of course, folks, I'm right here on MacVoices having a lot of fun talking to people like Jeff and Mark about interesting topics. We certainly hope you think they're interesting too. One quick little advertisement. We do a weekly newsletter to try to keep you updated with some of the things that are going on behind the scenes and all. Please visit the MacVoices website and subscribe. It's short, it's sweet every week, but it does keep you informed. Gentlemen, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun. We'll do it again.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Jeff.
It's always a blast.
Folks,
good to see you, Mark.
Good to be here.
Folks, with that, the verdict is in. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including MacVoices, Mac Notables, the MacJury, and the MacVoices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.